trade tariffs. Plus, a clean sweep for the president-elect as he takes the final battleground state of Arizona. Good morning. The King will lead the nation in a 2-minute silence in an hour's time to commemorate those who have died in conflict. He'll be joined by Prince William and the Princess of Wales, who is gradually returning to public duties following her cancer diagnosis. Queen Camilla will not be at the Cenotaph because she is suffering from a chest infection. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, joins me now. Rhiannon.
Well, you join us as the crowds and the anticipation is building ahead of that 2-minute silence in an hour's time. Behind me, you may be able to see that ex-servicemen and women are currently being processed along Whitehall to then gather close to the Cenotaph. In their hands, those wreaths that they will so proudly place at the foot of the Cenotaph following that 2-minute silence. Also behind me, you may be able to see the balconies on the Foreign Office, where, of course, members of the royal family will soon gather, among them the Princess of Wales. Now, it isn't exactly surprising that she's decided to be here for these remembrance events. Last night, she made that first appearance at the Festival of Remembrance, which is held by the Royal British Legion. And back in September, when we were told that her chemotherapy treatment was finished, it was very clear the palace wanted to brief us that this was one weekend that she would be doing her best to attend, despite the fact that she is only gradually returning to the royal duties. And the reason for that is because of how important this weekend is for the royal family. They see it as a central moment in the annual calendar when they are front and centre to lead this national moment of remembrance. But I think that's also why it's going to be quite difficult for Queen Camilla that she's not here today. A few days ago, we were told that she's currently suffering from a chest infection. The doctors have decided that while she is doing okay, apparently she's getting a little bit better, they've decided that it's probably best that she sits this one out, partly to protect others from her infection as well, potentially veterans, but also family members. But you have to remember that for the Queen, it will be difficult. She sees herself as very much coming from a military family. Her father, Major Bruce Shand, was awarded twice during the Second World War. So she sees this as very personal, especially now that she's Colonel-in-Chief of the Rifles, and in a year where she has done her best to be there alongside the King to support him as much as possible. But I think they told us yesterday that she wasn't coming, and they've told us early that the Princess of Wales will be here, because for a family, they don't want their appearance to be the main talking point. They want the focus to be on those who have made the ultimate sacrifice, on the servicemen and women who are going to gather here, on their families who are also part of that military family and also sacrifice so much to support their loved ones who serve. For anyone who's ever been here, it is a really poignant and moving moment to see this part of London, which is usually so busy and so noisy, fall silent. We're expecting around 10,000 people to be gathered here in Whitehall. Another 10,000 veterans and civilians are going to take part in that march past, which is organised by the Royal British Legion, and a whole range of ages in there as well. Representatives from Scotty's Little Soldiers, so young people who've lost their father or mother during conflict, but also members who were there for the D-Day landings, who we met in the summer, some of those veterans who are now in their 90s and their early hundreds. This is a really poignant, special day. At 11 o'clock, of course, we will fall silent for 2 minutes, and then the King will place that first wreath to really be centre of these commemorations.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. Our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce, joins me now, and Alistair will be talking us through proceedings from about 25 to 11 for an hour and a half or so. Alistair, it's good to see you. Just remind people of today's ceremony, how it's going to pan out.
Well, this is the key moment for the nation to reflect upon the cost of sacrifice made by those who have gone to war in the First World War, Second World War, and all those events since. And many of those lives have been lost in events more recently. And it is one of those occasions when I think echoing what takes place in many villages, towns and cities around the country, there is the opportunity for the veterans to be affirmed in the service they gave and to have a chance to think about those that they left behind, and to make sure that those who have given their lives in the interest of protecting the freedoms that this nation and the Commonwealth treasure are respected and always remembered. And for those veterans, and particularly for those who serve today, it is an affirming moment once a year to stop, to think, and to remember.
They are solemn proceedings, powerful to watch as well, and as Rhiannon was saying there, Alistair, particularly important for the royal family.
The King knows that as head of state, he is the fourth generation since George V started this ceremonial, which caught the public imagination after the First World War and has remained very central to a recognition in the nation that it is important. And so for the royal family, this is one of the key moments of the year. Not quite a constitutional duty, but certainly a national one. And the King sees being present, having watched his mother, Elizabeth II, and when he was very young, his grandfather, George VI, doing precisely this. It is that annual event that monarchs never wish to miss.
Alistair, many thanks indeed for now. We will speak again in around half an hour's time. Next, as President-elect Donald Trump prepares for his return to the White House in the new year, the government here insists it wants to protect and strengthen the trading relationship between the UK and the US in the face of possible tariffs. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury has appeared on Sunday morning with Trevor Phillips, and here's what Darren Jones had to say.
The position of the government is that we support free trade and we support the trading relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. It's a very strong, very fruitful relationship, both for us but also for the American economy. And of course, we want to protect that and strengthen it in the years ahead. And I think President-elect Trump has said that. I mean, he recognises the important relationship the US has with the UK, and that's the basis on which we will be cooperating in future years.
Our political correspondent Rob Powell joins me now. Rob, as Darren Jones said there, Donald Trump has alluded to the importance of the relationship, but he also says tariffs is his favourite word, so it will test just how special it really is.
Absolutely. I think there's a hope, if not probably quite an expectation, that maybe the UK's status now outside of the EU and the historic relationship between the UK and the US may make the President Trump, as he will be again, more maybe predisposed towards being potentially more lenient towards the UK. That said, I don't think anyone really thinks this will be a walk in the park. One person close to all of this in government said that the bottom line is that Trump's a businessman. He's not going to make it easy for the UK just because he likes our king. So I think in terms of the UK government approach, you heard Darren Jones there. That's being echoed by the Chancellor. She'll make a speech in the coming days where she will say that it is the UK's belief that global, free, open trade is the way to make countries richer. So there is perhaps sitting behind this a realisation that adopting a kind of back-footed and more meek approach with Trump in the White House is not necessarily the way to get what you want. That said, Labour are also dealing with the re-emergence, if you like, of some of the more awkward comments made by senior members of the government prior to Trump's presidency, this time round anyway, including the now Foreign Secretary David Lammy calling him a woman-hating sociopath. That was something that the new shadow Foreign Secretary for the Conservatives, Dame Priti Patel, brought up a little bit earlier.
And if I may just make the point, our chief diplomat, David Lammy, has not exactly been, he's not been full of warm and generous words, I think it's fair to say, historically, to President-elect. And these relationships...
He's saying that's all old news. Why are you bringing it up?
Well, Trevor, that is I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, diplomatic relationships are based on respect and trust. And America is a key ally of ours. And if they're going to listen to us, and if we're going to have constructive engagement, a good starting point would be to have that trusted relationship, one of mutual respect and understanding.
Now, Priti Patel's boss, the new Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, has written a piece today where she says that the US free trade deal that could potentially be on offer from President Trump should be the priority. She talks about how there's already been a number of rounds that took place under the previous Tory government, but they were essentially shelved when Joe Biden won the election 4 years ago. I think the danger here, though, and this is something that a former UK ambassador in the US has talked about today as well, is that what is the ask from the Trump White House in return for some sort of special trading arrangement? Now, Kim Darroch, Lord Darroch as he now is, who was the UK's man in Washington in the early part of the Trump presidency, is pretty clear that one of the demands would be to lower food standards to allow imports of things like chlorinated chicken, hormone-injected beef into the UK. The problem with that is, for a start, you'd get a backlash from the UK farming community, which Labour isn't exactly currying favour with at the moment anyway. But at a bigger level as well, you would probably increase friction, certainly increase friction with the European Union, which Sir Keir Starmer is also trying to forge closer economic links with in his pursuit of growth within the UK. So this is a very difficult balancing act. And some of this, I think, may depend on the stance that Sir Keir Starmer and the UK government adopt on other policy areas where we could see the USA changing tack in the coming months. Where are we on things like defence spending? We've heard military chiefs calling for that to be boosted. That would be something that would go down well with the Trump White House. What about our policy towards China, towards Iran? Keir Starmer talks a lot about difficult decisions and difficult trade-offs. I think what's clear is that events in America over the last week mean there'll be plenty more of those coming along the path.
No doubt, Rob. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the final state to be called in the US presidential election, Arizona, has gone to Donald Trump, according to projections from our partners at NBC News in the US. That leaves him with a total of 312 electoral seats and Kamala Harris with just 226. That is 80 fewer than her predecessor Joe Biden won 4 years ago in the Electoral College. But as the dust begins to settle, fingers are being pointed at the current president for the Democrats' dismal results. Our correspondent David Blevins has more.
Can I just ask you who you voted for this week?
Trump.
Trump, baby.
Trump all day.
This is Trump's town. They're basking in the glory of his landslide victory. But he'll head to Washington to meet Joe Biden on Wednesday with their expectations on his shoulders.
I don't even know. I don't know. Policies. He's an I get it, but his policies are way better. Better for Americans, 100%.
Yeah, I am able to look, because I look at his first 4 years in office. Did he do anything that everybody says he's going to do? You know, was he a dictator? Did he put Hillary in jail? Absolutely not. He's a businessman. He wants unity. And that's what we need for this country right now.
All I really care about is the money, you know, economy-wise, because before COVID happened or, you know, before anything happened, my rent was below $1,000, and right now it's almost at $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment. So it's only a 4-year difference, and it's gone up that much.
The president-elect is in transition mode, selecting his administration. The Democrats in disarray. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi adding her voice to the blame game.
Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. Kamala, I think, still would have won, but she may have been stronger, having taken her case to the public sooner.
Donald Trump won Florida by 1% in 2016, by 13% this time. That's why Democrats are struggling to adjust to the new reality. That result represents a radically different America. But even here, at the centre of Trump's political orbit, a state building on its deep red reputation, there are those who fear his second term in the White House. Tell me in one word what you think will change most under a Trump presidency. What do you...
Can I use two?
Yeah.
Women's rights.
Florida is staunchly conservative on social issues. It shaped his campaign and could shape America for the next 4 years, as the politics of this place roll towards Washington. David Blevins, Sky News, at West Palm Beach in Florida.
You're watching Sky News today. Coming up, we'll run through this morning's political interviews, including Trevor Phillips' chat with Treasury Minister Darren Jones and Shadow Foreign Secretary Dame Priti Patel. Trevor joins me shortly.
First Minister, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Nice to see you.
How are you feeling?
Looking forward to getting into the parliamentary chamber.
Are you any further forward to making a decision?
No, it's an important day today.
All of the claims were in line with my parliamentary duties, so I'm making that clear to you, Conor.
He was a Scot through and through.
He was a very good politician.
Alex Salmond was controversial, he was a disruptor, but above all, he was respected.
Will you resign if you lose this week?
Again, I'm not planning to, of course, lose the vote of no confidence. I'm planning to win that vote of no confidence.
His face said it all.
My intention to stand down as party leader.
This is now a storm with deadly consequences. How are they feeling?
They're a bit scared at the minute.
We've been told to evacuate.
How are you feeling?
Devastated.
Hundreds of homes were wiped out by flooding. I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent.
It was probably the darkest time in my life.
Scott is 5 years sober after a cocaine addiction left him close to death. Scotland has a shameful record, worse than England, the worst in Europe.
Why not just say you've failed? Because then you might get more respect from families who've lost loved ones.
This is where one of the UK's most prolific rapists thought he'd got away with murder.
Sky News can reveal that former sex workers had told police he was sexually violent.
My Emma.
Free wherever you get your news.
It's over, isn't it?
The Americans say he is, Rossi, a fraudster.
This has been one of the most bizarre cases ever heard in a courtroom in this country.
A dangerous murderer.
Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Ennis after this?
She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars.
By doing the right thing, it's destroyed your life.
They terrorised me. They intimidated me.
Sky News, the full story first.
More on Remembrance Sunday now as the nation prepares to remember those who have given their lives in combat. Joining me from the Cenotaph is Nikki Scott, the founder of Scotty's Little Soldiers, a military charity that Nikki set up after the death of her husband who died in Afghanistan. With Nikki is Lexi Pallett, whose father was a sergeant in the RAF. It is good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Nikki,
it's good to be here and raise awareness.
Well, Nikki, first of all, I'd like to talk to you about Lee. Tell us about him.
He's a real cheeky, chappy, caused a lot of mischief, I think, in the military, but was an amazing dad to our two young children and very proud to serve his country. So I'm really honoured to be here with the rest of Scotties to remember Lee and all our fallen heroes.
And you set up Scotty's in his... I'm guessing Scotty was his nickname, perhaps. But you set it up in Lee's memory a year after his death in 2010 to help families, kids like Lexi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so anyone who's experienced the death of a parent who served in our country, doesn't matter the cause of death, doesn't matter how long it's been, doesn't matter whether they were serving or a veteran, Scotties wants to be able to provide a community for these children and help them in a number of different ways to make sure they feel like they're never ever forgotten.
I know it's a bit noisy there right now, so appreciate your patience. Of course they are. They were always going to do it right now, weren't they? Lexi, let me talk to you. It's good to see you. Tell me about your dad, Oliver, because he died around 4 years ago, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He was a lovely man. He was a great dad. He was so passionate about what he did, and he was a raging geek, but he was our geek.
A raging geek. Would he mind you saying that on national television about him?
He definitely would mind, yes.
Listen, it's so powerful to hear you talking about these armed forces men that you loved and cared about and are sadly no longer with us. And that will be replicated across the country today, of course. Many people will know or have had loved ones that were lost in conflict or whilst they've been part of the armed forces. So, Lexi, just tell us how important days like today are to you.
It's so important because I think not only remembrance for us is every day, but I think remembrance for the whole country today, it is so important to remember the fallen and also remember the people that are still fighting. And I think it's just to see the entire public come together and remember the fallen, it's so honourable to be here today.
Was it something your dad held dear as well? I mean, in some ways more poignant for those who've served in the armed forces because they know what it's like to put their lives on the line for the rest of us.
Definitely, remembrance has always been a massive part of our family, even before my dad died. We'd go to all the Remembrance Parade in our town, and we'd always watch the Festival of Remembrance on the TV. So I think remembrance has always been a massive thing. So I think he'd be so proud of me being here today.
Oh, no doubt. And Alexi, just final question to you. How important has Scotty's been in helping you deal with the situation you found yourself in?
Scotties has been so important to me, and they mean so much because not only do they support us in our bereavement and helping us understand that it's not only how to deal with your grief, it's how to grow around it and how to understand it. It's the fact that we are able to meet up with so many other families and so many other children that have gone through what we've gone through, so we don't have to explain in so much detail about how we're feeling because they already know, and it's so nice to be part of that family and to be part of that community.
Nikki, just to come back to you, look, I'm sure you will tell me that Lee would have been so proud to see what you've achieved for Lexi and lots of other people who have to cope with the bereavement of a loved one who's in the armed forces. But you have got one particular, quite well-known supporter, a certain Prince Harry. Tell me about that.
Yeah, Prince Harry's amazing, actually. He obviously experienced the death of his mum when he was young. He served in the military, so naturally the children just feel like a rapport with him. He really understands what they've gone through, and he gives a lot of time behind the scenes, supporting us, him and his team. So yeah, he's been a massive help, and he actually provided all the children here today with sweets as well. So they've all got sweets in their pockets when you see them from Prince Harry, which was amazing. He was like, I don't need any publicity about this, I just really want to do this. And it's stuff like that it makes you feel really special.
It really means a lot to us.
Yeah, everyone, even the royals, are remembering our loved ones.
Yeah, I'd imagine, Nikki, that your wider family must be so impressed with what you've done. I mean, it takes a certain kind of stoicism after the loss you've had to then push on and want to help others. What has given you that drive to do it?
I think the young people. I think at first very much I realised there's some amazing military charities in the UK, but such little support for bereaved forces children. So my children were the passion. I wanted to do so in Lee's memory. I wanted to help. And then every time I hear about the impact that the team have through Scotties, and I meet children like Lexi and the whole community at Scotties, it makes me, it makes all the late nights, all the frustration, all the hard work worth it when you know you've made a difference and you're having a positive impact.
Look, it will fall silent there at 11 o'clock. There will also be a silence tomorrow, of course, on the 11th of the 11th. I'd just like to finish by asking you, when you do fall silent to remember those men that you loved and lost, what do you think about?
Oh, that's a personal question. For me, I just spend the time to think about Lee. I think about Scotties. I think about all the children that I've known. I think about all our serving personnel. I've still got friends that serve today. But yeah, of course, Lee and my children, when I take that minute's silence, 2 minutes silence, they are very much on the forefront of my mind, and just taking that time to remember is so important.
I appreciate it is a personal question, and grateful to you for answering. Lexi, would you like to answer, but you don't feel that you have to?
No, I think just when I take my 2 minute silence, I think about my dad and I think about all the happy memories I have with him, and that I'm so grateful that I had him in my life, and I honour him and the work that he did while he was in service.
Listen, I really appreciate your time this morning. It's a moving and emotional day, but it's great to hear from both of you, Nikki and Lexi, and it's also worth repeating, we're sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There was one name which provided something of a theme to today's Sunday Morning Trevor Phillips programme, and that name inevitably was the Donald Trump. Trevor joins me now after his show. Good morning to you. I mean, what a week it's been. We thought it would still be rumbling on by now, but it was, well, an unexpected and very decisive win on the other side of the Atlantic, Trevor.
Indeed, Matt. By the way, just before we start on our business, I just want to say that's a rather humbling interview that you just did. What extraordinary women. On the Donald Trump thing, well, first of all, there are all these people now who are emerging who are telling you, oh, yeah, we knew. Not a bit of it. Everybody thought it was going to be knife edge. It was not knife edge at all. he walked it. Of course, as John Sopel, who was one of our panelists today, said, there is going to be the mother of all post-mortems amongst the Democrats about how they could have lost. But, you know, we now have President Trump for at least another 4 years. And by the way, one of the things that people are saying, I think this is right, even though Trump will only be there for 4 years, he has already changed the terms of politics for many, many years to come. So what happens now is going to be very, very significant, certainly for the rest of my lifetime, probably yours as well.
Yes, well, definitely. Until, though, Trevor, he takes office after being inaugurated in January for the second time, of course, a lot of it's conjecture. We just don't really know what the relationship is going to be like. So let's talk about things a bit closer to home, because I know you discussed with Darren Jones, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, about whether they would engage with Nigel Farage to be some sort of a go-between, given the closeness of his relationship. But in some ways, more pressing for people here is the continued fallout from Labour's first budget. Our colleague Mark Kleiman broke a story yesterday about a group of hospitality businesses signing a joint letter to say this is going to cause problems and job losses. We read today in the papers that Tesco, which is I think the biggest private employer in the UK, is facing an extra £1 billion bill because of the national insurance rises. Is there a potential for this to backfire in terms of rising prices and fewer jobs?
Well, I think there are all sorts of hostages to fortune that have been laid by this budget. You've mentioned a couple of them. One of them that I discussed with Darren Jones is public spending. We don't know, for example, what the impact of further conflict in the Middle East will be, except that we know it's going to be more expensive. We don't know what we might have to do if the Trump White House decides to wind down its contribution to the support of Ukraine. Will we fill in or not? And we don't know when and how our government is, aside from any of those things, is going to meet its pledge, now repeated several times by Prime Minister, Chancellor, Defence Minister, that they want to get to 2.5% of GDP. So actually a whole series of things have been set out by the government to which we won't yet have an answer. And elsewhere on the programme, the boss of our armed forces, Tony Radakin, says, yeah, we want to get to 2.5% of GDP spent on our armed forces, but we need to be even stronger than that. And that means that the 40 billion they've raised on taxes may turn out not to be enough. And that's going to be another mare's nest because, of course, Rachel Reeves told me last week, we're not coming back for more tax rises. So where are they going to find the money? This story is a long way from over.
A lot of known unknowns, to quote a certain famous Republican in Donald Rumsfeld. Just very quickly to finish off, Trevor, Dame Priti Patel returning to the front benches in Kemi Badenoch's shadow cabinet, and she was on talking to you as well. Yeah, she was. She is now the shadow foreign secretary, and she brought the typical Priti Patel bit of steel. You know, I think she'll be constructive, but she was absolutely clear that she thinks that the government's not doing a terrific job and that they need to, as it were, stiffen their spines, particularly, I guess, on Ukraine. But once again, Mr. Trump enters the picture, and it is not entirely clear what she thinks Trump will do. The one thing that both Darren Jones and Priti Patel were clear about, could Nigel Farage be of help to the British government in smoothing a relationship with the White House? Darren Jones says Farage should have better things to do. Priti Patel may be open to it. Well, they're not in government, though, are they? So, yeah, maybe it's easier for her to say and for Darren Jones not to for the time being. Trevor, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Matt.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, we will be live at the Cenotaph as the King leads the nation on Remembrance Sunday. Welcome back. This is the scene at the Cenotaph as the King prepares to lead the nation on Remembrance Sunday. Let's bring in our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce, who will be guiding you through the commemorations today. And Alistair, it's important to mention that the commemorations don't just start and stop today. Of course, they continue into tomorrow, as it's the 11th of the 11th.
It was after the First World War that the nation needed some kind of way to deal with the immense loss of life across what was then the entire empire. And King George V was advised to have a time of pause to mark the moment of armistice on the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour. And that has been maintained ever since, with the closest Sunday being a national moment for gathering. There are representatives of different political parties gathering to watch this event and take part, and also seen gathered around this central part of Whitehall, the armed forces of today, who are standing ready to defend the nation in the way that the generations before, including the veterans, who have come to remember those who were their compatriots in battle and who didn't come home. So yes, it is the most remarkably poignant time, particularly for people who have served, but also for those others who serve, who are the families of people who choose to be in the armed forces, the families who face long time of not knowing what is the situation for those that they love. And the music will begin and will take us through this extraordinary annual event when everybody can bring their thoughts to fill the cenotaph, the empty tomb, at the centre of this event. It is in this time of peaceful reflection that families around the world can gather and remember those who lost their lives, or, if there isn't anyone in mind, to consider the immense loss of life that has led to the protection of freedoms that so many take for granted rightly in their daily lives. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Halliday, the Senior Director of Music of the bands of the Household Division, leading the band of His Majesty's Royal Marines, the mass bands of the Household Division, and the band of the Royal Air Force. First of all with Royal Britannia, and then Heart of Oak, gathering, as it were, through music, the four parts of the United Kingdom here in our thoughts at Whitehall. And coming to mark this national moment of remembrance will be His Majesty the King and members of the royal family. Rhiannon, you're there. It is a very important moment for all the royal family.
It is, and if you consider the fact that this has been an incredibly difficult year for the royal family with the cancer diagnosis for both His Majesty the King and also the Princess of Wales. At the start of the year, I think it was in doubt as to what engagements the King may be able to carry out. But I think today is one that the entire family will always do their best to attend. And that is why when the Princess of Wales announced back in September that her chemotherapy treatment had come to an end, the palace were very keen to brief us at the time that this was a weekend that she would be doing her best to try and attend alongside other members of the family. Of course, there is that personal connection at the highest level, the King as head of the armed forces, but also on a more personal and intimate level, members of the royal family who have served themselves, and also the fact that Queen Camilla isn't able to be here because she's suffering from a chest infection, I think will be particularly difficult for her. We don't often talk about it, but she does see herself very much as being from a military family. Her father, Major Bruce Shand, was awarded the Military Cross twice during the Second World War, so she will be missed here. And also a sadness for her, I think, to not be alongside her husband for this important day.
The great Welsh tune, Man of Harlech, bringing those distant valleys here to our mind here in Whitehall. And now, for the first time, the pipes and drums from the Royal Air Force will lead and take our thoughts to Scotland with the Skye Boat Song. Led by Air Officer Scotland, Pipe Major Ian Hughes, the Royal Air Force Pipes and Drums. We move on to Isle of Beauty, a traditional tune played by the mass bands of the Household Division. As we gather to contemplate on the terrible loss of life in conflicts past, there are a number of anniversaries that are poignant to recall in 2024. It's the 75th anniversary of the establishment of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in 1949, brought together after the Second World War to try and ensure that it deterred Soviet expansionism, prevented the return of nationalist militarism to Europe, and to demonstrate a political resolve. There's also been some activities in order to protect NATO's interests during the year from serving service people. We reflect also on the Entente Cordiale with France that was signed 120 years ago, that has ensured France being a great ally during 2 world wars. Memories of the 80th anniversary of the terrible fighting in Italy at Monte Cassino, when so many people lost their lives, and also at Imphal and Kohima. In May, 80 years ago, a battle that led to that wonderful line of memory, when you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today. In June this year, we remembered the 80th anniversary of D-Day and the great hope that that represented. But in more recent wars, at Kosovo, we recall 25 years since the activities and conflict began there in the difficulties of June 25 years ago. In September, we recalled the extraordinary heroic bravery at Arnhem, Operation Market Garden, that had led to a bridge too far. And it's the 10th anniversary of operations in Afghanistan. For all those who recall, particularly more recent losses in those operations, this is a moment of reflection. The pipes and drums play Flowers of the Forest, remembering all those who died fighting in Scotland at the Battle of Flodden in 1513. Including in those who were killed were 3 brothers from Glamis, who were predecessors of the king whose grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, had come from Glamis. And so history is gathered here in the music, as we also prepare for the playing next of Elgar's Nimrod, where Elgar reflects upon one of his great friends. And perhaps while it plays, let us all listen to the music of Nimrod and remember those who we wish to bring to mind. And led by the National President, the wreath bearers of the Royal British Legion take their positions behind where later the royal family will stand when the King leads the nation. For them too, as the music of Elgar's Nimrod plays, they represent so many memories. Just to the right of the centre of our shot, the Garrison Sergeant Major, who is so responsible for this ceremony, as we look towards the door of the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and either side, holders of the King's Scout Award, representing from all across the nation 600,000 members of the Scout Association. Today, the Scouts play their part by handing out the orders of service to the crowd, and as an honour, they line the route in and out that later on the procession will use. And the first of those processions, led by the cross-bearer, Fox Robbins, with, following him, 10 children of the Chapels Royal, and the 6 gentlemen in ordinary, who will together sing the service later on with their Director of Music, Richard Quesnel. And the music, When I Am Laid in Earth, by Purcell. Wound into the cross are the poppies of remembrance, so proudly worn by people across the nation and across the world today. And commanding the ceremony today, the Major General commanding the Household Division, Major General James Bowder, with his Chief of Staff, Colonel Guy Stone, and his aide-de-camp, Captain Alexander Villiers-Smith. And in the clergy, taking part in the ceremony today, the Forces Chaplain will be Air Vice Marshal, the Very Reverend Giles Leagood, Chaplain-in-Chief of the Royal Air Force. The Sub-Dean of the Chapels Royal, Lieutenant Colonel the Reverend Canon Paul Wright, and the service will be led by the Dean of the Chapels Royal, the Bishop of London, the Right Reverend and Right Honourable Dame Sarah Mullally. And led by the Prime Minister and the leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition, the procession of those who will lay wreaths on behalf of political parties and Parliament will be followed by 8 former Prime Ministers, Sir John Major, Sir Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, the Lord Cameron, Baroness May of Maidenhead, Boris Johnson, Elizabeth Truss, and Rishi Sunak. Members of Cabinet, too, who have the responsibilities now of Government of the United Kingdom, as the great Cenotaph marked there with the white ensign, the Union flag, and the blue ensign, representing the Royal Navy, the nation, and the auxiliary services. As the Chiefs of Staff, led by the Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, take their position, their responsibilities obviously carrying those of the personnel in defence, the Royal Navy, the Army, and the Royal Air Force, and also the 3 representatives of the civilian services who will lay their wreaths. The ambassadors of Nepal and Ireland, along with High Commissioners and their representatives from all the Commonwealth countries, except for those who are not at the moment part of the Commonwealth, but who are also remembered because so many from their nations also laid down their lives for freedom in the Second World War. and the representatives of different faiths. 22 religious leaders will take their position here representing those many faiths, among them the Baptist Union, Christian Free Churches, Spiritualists, National Union, Humanists, Judaism, the representatives of the Greek Orthodox Church, Church of Scotland, the Buddhist faith, Methodist Conference, Coptic Christians, the Islamic religious advisor to the armed forces. And the scene is set now for members of the royal family led by His Majesty the King to come and lead the nation in this 2-minute silence when, by tradition, everyone may stop and recall the sacrifice that has led to the freedoms we enjoy. The parade will be brought to attention. All still now and prepared. The armed forces have formed their hollow square. The veterans wait in their multitude. And all around the nation and those following from around the world prepare to do their duty to the dead. Led by the King, the royal family, and their equerries carrying their various wreaths. The King will lead the nation in this annual act of remembrance, which begins at the first strike of Big Ben at 11 o'clock, when a gun will fire in Horse Guards. Wherever you are, whoever you are thinking about, remember them. The King, on behalf of the nation, will lay his wreath on the side of this memorial, which is the focus of all our thoughts. And he will salute the dead. On behalf of Her Majesty the Queen, who is unable to be here due to a seasonal chest infection, Her Equerry lays his wreath where consorts always have their wreaths laid. The Prince of Wales with his traditional wreath with the heir apparent's feathers on the other side. Saluting for another generation. Captain George Hopkins presents the Duke of Edinburgh with his wreath, wearing the uniform of the Royal Wessex Yeomanry, which he became honorary colonel for over 20 years ago. The Princess Royal, receiving her wreath from Commander Anne Sullivan. Again, saluting. And finally, Lieutenant Peter Myburgh, on behalf of His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent. As a boy, the Duke of Kent learnt in the Second World War of the death of his father in an air crash in Scotland. The parade will stand at ease. And the music of the Funeral March No. 1 in B-flat minor by Beethoven, as the Prime Minister, on behalf of the government, lays his wreath. For the first time, the Right Honourable Sir Keir Starmer as Prime Minister and First Lord of the Treasury. The recently appointed leader of His Majesty's loyal opposition, the Right Honourable Kemi Badenoch. Watched by members of the royal family from the balconies there, including the Princess of Wales, as the Right Honourable Sir Ed Davey, on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Party. The Right Honourable Stephen Flynn will lay a wreath on behalf of both the Scottish National Party and Plaid Cymru parliamentary groups. The wreath for the Democratic Unionist Party will be laid by the Right Honourable Gavin Robinson. On behalf of the whole House of Commons, for the first time in this Parliament, the Speaker, the Right Honourable Sir Lindsay Hoyle. And likewise, on behalf of the House of Lords, the Lord Speaker. The Lord not fall. On behalf of the two intelligence services and agencies, the Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Affairs and the Secretary of State for the Home Department, the Right Honourable David Lammy and the Right Honourable Yvette Cooper. Our minds now travel around the world to the nations, islands, and territories who are represented, who played their part in winning freedom. First of all, the Crown dependencies and overseas territories. The bailiwick of Guernsey, the bailiwick of Jersey, the Isle of Man, Anguilla, Bermuda, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, the Falkland Islands, Gibraltar, Montserrat, Pitcairn Islands, St. Helena, Ascension, and Tristan da Cunha, and Turks and Caicos. The High Commissioners and their representatives, first of all, of Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Ghana, and Malaysia, watched by the Princess of Wales. as each group comes forward. This famous memorial of Portland white stone is marked with the blood-red memories of each nation's dead. This time Nigeria, Cyprus, Sierra Leone, Tanzania, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Uganda and Kenya. Representatives of Malawi, the island of Malta, George Cross, the honour given by George VI for the immense courage of that island during endless battle. Zambia, the Gambia, Singapore, which also faced such a tremendous battle during the Second World War. Guyana, Botswana, Lesotho and Barbados. The representatives now of Mauritius, Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, Tonga, Fiji, Bangladesh, the Bahamas, Grenada, Papua New Guinea, the Seychelles, the Commonwealth of Dominica, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The hundreds of young who set off from those far distant lands to make their way to battlefields in different parts of the world. And we remember the families that faced the loss of so many. The final group of representatives from the Commonwealth: Belize, Antigua and Barbuda, Maldives, St. Christopher and Nevis, Brunei Darussalam, Namibia, Cameroon, Mozambique, Rwanda, Gabon, and Togo. And recalling the incredible service of the Gurkhas since the 1860s in serving alongside the British Armed Forces. The ambassador of Nepal, along with our closest neighbour and ally, the ambassador of Ireland, will lay their wreaths. And on behalf of the Armed Forces, Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, the Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Sir Ben Key, the First Sea Lord and Chief of Naval Staff, General Sir Roland Walker, Chief of the General Staff, and Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, on behalf of the Royal Air Force. And the final wreaths laid on behalf of the civilian services this year by Captain Robin Batt for the Merchant Navy and Fishing Fleets, Mrs. Candida Adkins, our Transport Auxiliary Association, and Mark Hardingham on behalf of the National Fire Chiefs Council. And immediately they have laid their wreaths. The Dean of the Chapels Royal, the Bishop of London, will lead the service.
That we here do honour to the memory of those who have died in the service of their country and of the crown. May we so be inspired by the spirit of their love and fortitude, that forgetting all selfish and unworthy motives, we may only live to guide people unto the service of mankind. Through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Unto God's gracious mercy and protection we commit you. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace, this day and always. Amen.
Trumpeters of the Royal Air Force will now sound the rouse, followed by the national anthem. With a salute, the King and the royal family will take leave of this national act of remembrance. His Majesty, dressed as an Admiral of the Fleet in the Royal Navy, the service with which he spent most of his training and commanded his own ship and served until his royal duties took him elsewhere. For him, the responsibility of all servicemen and women who put their loyalty to serve and put their lives on the line in his name. The Sergeant of the Vestry leads the Dean of the Chapels Royal and the Sub-Dean. Away from this moment of peaceful reflection, a simple act of religious observance, which would have been recognized by so many servicemen and women in their normal lives, facing danger. The Prime Minister, with other political leaders on whom so much responsibility rests for ensuring the security of the nation, and those who have faced that responsibility before, former Prime Ministers, 8 of them, and members of the Cabinet. Each of them has a responsibility, not only to their constituencies, but also to those departments for which they speak. As the representatives of the Crown dependencies and of the Commonwealth, who have marked this Portland stone memorial with the remembrance of so many nations around the world, watched by the generation of today's servicemen and women who stand ready under the command of the chiefs, of the Defence Staff and of the 3 services to do their duty. And always keeping civil society well served are the representatives of so many of the civilian services too. And the 22 representatives of the wide range of faiths and religions that are observed in the United Kingdom, so many of them with representatives who work closely with those who hold different faiths in the armed forces in their duty day by day. And there they are, the memories, the thoughts, the representative poppies of your own thoughts that you have considered in this national act of remembrance. As the Major General commanding the Household Division will take leave also from this parade, marking the end of the national act of remembrance here. And Major Andrew Campbell of the Welsh Guards stands those serving at ease. He joined the Welsh Guards as a guardsman, made his way up through the ranks and became an officer, and is now company commander of the 1st Battalion of the Welsh Guards, leading this parade with his words of command. And now the wreaths of the Royal British Legion, who have organised this event but have held back and witnessed the National Act of Remembrance, who now will get their chance to lay their wreaths on behalf of the different parts of the Royal British Legion. And led by the Royal British Legion National President, Vice Admiral retired Paul Bennett, who represents an organisation that throughout the nation has done so much to draw attention to the work that is done on behalf of injured or affected ex-service men and women who in their own time have stepped forward to serve, whose families are perhaps left behind in need or in difficulty. And it is the Royal British Legion and your contributions to the Poppy Appeal around the country, including the Scottish Poppy Appeal, that make it possible for so many to receive help. And Vice Admiral Duncan Potts on behalf of the Royal Naval Association. And while these wreaths are being laid, His Majesty the King and other members of the royal family will be leaving the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, and the Prince of Wales will be taken to Horse Guards Parade, where later he will receive a salute from all those veterans who will shortly march past the Cenotaph. On behalf of the Army Benevolent Fund, the Soldiers' Charity, General Sir James Everard. I'm joined in the studio, I'm delighted to say, by former Chief of the Defence Staff, Marshal of the Royal Air Force, the Lord Stirrup, just before the Royal Air Forces Association wreath is laid by Air Vice Marshal Alistair Reid. Sir, this must mean a great deal to you.
It certainly does. And I took part in the Remembrance ceremony event for many years. And the service, the short service, which you've just seen, is always incredibly poignant, incredibly moving. But the most moving part of the whole day for me was what we're about to witness, which is the march past of all the people who come from far and wide across the country to participate in this enormous national act of remembrance. Perhaps the most important aspect of this day, I think, for the nation is that it puts a human face on armed conflict. There's a great danger that as the conflicts that we all know and read about, some of us have participated in, recede into the past, they become statistics and dates. But actually, it's the people that are important, the people that do their duty, that sacrifice so much, and who sometimes, alas, make the ultimate sacrifice. And this day is all about people. And the presence of those people in the march past, I think, really emphasises that point.
And the Royal Commonwealth Ex-Services League wreath is laid by Major General Mitch Mitchell, reminding us that, there is this huge amount of involvement from all across the Commonwealth in remembering, as we now wait for also the Legion Scotland wreath to be placed by David Bowie. And finally, we will see the Transport for London wreath laid by Baldev Singh Shan. Lord Stewart, what goes through your mind during the 2-minute silence?
Well, so many things. My grandfather fought in both World Wars. One of his brothers was captured in the retreat to Dunkirk and died in a prisoner of war camp in 1943. My father fought in the Second World War, and of course I've seen and been involved in many conflicts since. This isn't an uncommon story. There are so many people throughout the country who are in the same situation. I think of all of those things. I think of the people that have gone before, those that are still with us and those, alas, who are not. And I think of them as people, not as numbers. And that, I think, is the most important thing about this whole day.
Lord Stewart, we've been watching this event from here, but down at Whitehall, my friend Rhiannon Mills, who is our royal correspondent. Rhiannon, this has been a very special day for His Majesty the King. Sad not to have the Queen with him, but to have the Princess of Wales present. A very special way of the nation being led today.
I have to say, Alistair, being down here, the one thing that really stands out amongst everything is whether it's for the military, whether it's for the veterans, or whether it's for the monarchy. Today is really about a sense of family. And that's been overwhelmingly clear today as we still see people waiting here on Whitehall, waiting for the important march past that the Royal British Legion organise every year to take place. As you said, of course, the Princess of Wales was there on the balcony watching on as the King laid that first wreath on behalf of the nation. The Queen's equerry then had to place her wreath, and then the Princess's husband, Prince William, then placed his wreath also at the foot of the Cenotaph. Actually, since September, since we were told that Kate's chemotherapy treatment had come to an end, the palace were really keen to tell us very early on that she would be doing everything she could possible to be here. Not because I think she feels she needs to be seen for her sake, but really to try and reflect the focus back onto those who've served, back onto those who've made that ultimate sacrifice, and also to be there alongside the rest of the family. And when you saw that Queen Camilla wasn't able to attend today because she still has that chest infection and doctors had told her it was probably best for her to rest at home, the fact that you had a joint appearance from the Prince and Princess of Wales, I think would have been even more significant for the King to have their support. It is also important to reflect on the King's attendance. At the start of the year, we of course found out that he himself also had cancer. He is still going through that cancer treatment, but he is doing everything he can to continue with those public-facing duties. And for him, this day would have been amongst one of the most important that he would have wanted to achieve throughout this year. It is hugely significant for him as the head of the armed forces, but also through those personal military connections that the family have had over so many decades, to be there to lay that wreath at the foot of the Cenotaph. What has been also wonderful today is you have that mixture of, yes, you have that sombre reflection, but also we've heard applause as well as the ex-service men and women made their way onto Whitehall. Today is a really important moment where the country can come together to, yes, pause and reflect on those who made the ultimate sacrifice, but also I think celebrate and recognise service. And that's why for the royal family it was so important for them to be here, as many of them that could be, to, in their own way, in their own sense of duty, reflect back on others who serve.
And the music is changing its tune as we build up and prepare for the Great March Past. And it'll be led this year by the Royal Marines, who are marking their 360th anniversary this year. And it is the first time, and this is special for you, Lord Stirrup, that we have the pipes and drums of the Royal Air Force.
Splendid.
The preparations for this March Past, which involves nearly 10,000 former servicemen and women, or those associated with armed forces organisations, or perhaps even civilian organisations, takes an enormous amount of planning. And many people help to get everyone here. There's Scotty's little friends waiting to do their March Past, and you'll recognise that each of these different organisations are marked by their own distinctive badges or insignia, and they're desperately proud to be representing those who can't be here. I'm very proud to be the ambassador for the taxi charity for military veterans, known as Poppy Taxis, and they have been holding their taxis ready at all the principal London arrival points, the stations and coach stations, to bring veterans, particularly from the Second World War, who are now very old, and other conflicts, who find it difficult to get here, to make sure that they too can march past as we look at His Majesty the King's wreath, principal as it is here at the Cenotaph. And we take a little bit of time to move the bands into position and get it ready for this moment of change. But what I think we should all bear in mind, particularly if we're in London, but no matter where you are in the United Kingdom, if after watching this you go out and see a veteran with their medals in a pub or in a location, go and talk to them, have a chat with them, and find out who they've been thinking of today, and share the stories of who you've been thinking about too. So, Lord Stirrup, what you must be thinking now?
Well, I'm just reflecting, watching and listening to the wonderful pipers, that it's entirely appropriate that they should be leading off today, because the Royal Air Force, like the other two services, has always had a very strong connection with Scotland and all other parts of the United Kingdom as well. But I spent several years of my career in Scotland, living and working there. So I'm just delighted to see them there. It reflects the fact that Scotland has an important strategic role in the provision of defence for this entire United Kingdom.
Air Officer Scotland's Pipe Major, as he is leading them today, and they received a Sovereign's piping banner from His Majesty the King earlier this year at Balmoral. The third time they had played for the Sovereign there. Twice they played for Queen Elizabeth II. And I'm used to seeing them. In my time as Governor of Edinburgh Castle, they regularly came to play at the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo. And here we go for the March Past of the veterans. Let's wish them well. And appropriately, the first music played, the Royal British Legion's own march by Bidgood. And the senior members of the Royal British Legion have led, and they're followed by these many columns of veterans, each of them giving their eyes left to the Cenotaph, which has at its top the idea of an empty tomb into which everyone can place their thoughts. And waiting at the side of the memorial are the wreath receivers. They take them and place them around the Cenotaph to make sure that all these memories are kept. They're great bits of music, aren't they?
And you know, when I used to take part in the Cenotaph ceremony, the 30-minute service that we just witnessed was always tremendously moving. But after that, I would always go up to one of the Foreign Office balconies and stay there for the rest of it and watch the entire march past, because it was just so stunning to see so many people coming. And of course, when you watch it on television, you just see them marching past. You don't realise how long they've been waiting and assembling. They've travelled from across the country. They spent hours getting into position, getting ready for this. And this is their moment.
The pace is slightly slower than that used by marching bands for serving soldiers, sailors, airmen and women, but that is to account for veterans who have perhaps taken a toll over their service period and go just a tad slower, but with no less vigour for remembering those they've come to recall. One of the most poignant memories just there, top left of our picture, is of the white cross of chrysanthemums placed there by the widows. And I think in its simplicity, it does recall quite how much the cost of sacrifice in a family can be.
Absolutely. And of course, we talk of widows, and the Widows Association is tremendously important. But in this modern age, of course, it's not just ladies who are next of kin. The ladies are fighting, and unfortunately sometimes the ladies are dying as well. So we have to remember all of those who are bereaved by conflict. And of course it's not just the widows and the husbands, it's the children, it's the brothers, the sisters, the wider family.
And we saw some of those representatives of the Normandy veterans marching past just then. It's been a busy year to remember Normandy.
It certainly has. It's been a year of many, many anniversaries, as you mentioned earlier during your commentary. And of course, there are going to be a great many more coming up. It's perhaps a little frightening to realise that we're not far off the centenary of the beginning of the Second World War. Thoughts will have to be turning soon in government circles to how that is commemorated.
And the music plays. It's a long way to Tipperary as we listen to an arrangement of songs that were sung by so many of the soldiers to try and keep their spirits up as they marched to the trenches in the First World War. That grisly reality of a stationary war that went on for many, many years. And perhaps I could reflect on the fact, as a trustee of the Commonwealth War Graves Foundation, anybody who gets the chance to go and visit any of the war graves around the world that are so beautifully maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Foundation will realise, and the Commission will realise quite how valued those who have lost their lives are.
And it goes beyond that, because if you actually go to those cemeteries and you visit them and you look at the inscriptions on the crosses, it suddenly brings home to you the cost of war. You see so many names and you see so many ages, 18, age 19, age 18, age 19, and you suddenly realize that these were young people who had their future ahead of them. And it was all cut short because of the sacrifice they made on behalf of the security of this country and its people. And it comes back to what I said earlier. We must remember that it's about people, it's about individuals, it's not just numbers.
With all your experience as a former chief of the Defence Staff and chief in so many different theatres and roles, you know, the world is not looking pretty at the moment, and we see the young servicemen and women standing, holding the ground here for the veterans to go past. Your thoughts about service today?
Well, I think that we should always bear in mind that famous dictum, if you want peace, prepare for war. There's no surer way of avoiding the sorts of sacrifice that we're remembering today than to deter conflict. And to deter conflict, you have to be strong and you have to be resolute. You rely upon the service of all those young men and women who are in the armed forces today. You rely on their professionalism and on their dedication to keep the country safe and to avoid war. But the only way you can be sure of avoiding war is to be ready for it.
And as those great songs from previous wars are being played out by the bands, here come the in-pensioners of the Royal Hospital Chelsea. And you know, when you look at them and you see their experience and their medals, each of them memories for those in-pensioners, they get such a cheer.
They certainly do, and they deserve it as well. But of course, they are representative of a much wider community. When we look at them, we honour them and we remember, but we must remember what they represent, which is so many people who have given so much over so many years.
Oh, 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 what a lovely war. It's a great song, and of course sung by so many of these in-pensioners' predecessors as they went to the trenches, and led by the captain of invalids there, and supported by so many of their own. I love the fact that many are giving a little bit of help to the wheelchairs of their friends. Now the bands of His Majesty's Royal Marines and of the Royal Air Force will lead us with "They'll Always Be in England." Look at the courage of that veteran, determined to keep up with his colleagues as they march away and supported by his friends. It's all about how people support each other in these veteran organisations. Lord Stirrup, you watch this and there are always things to notice.
Well, I think it's very interesting in the shots we're seeing, the veterans marching past, all are currently serving who are on parade, and you see the contrast between the veterans, the older, should I say, veterans and the young serving personnel. But also it's a sign of great continuity, that tradition of service continues across so many years. I think the other thing we have to remember, and I reflect on it when you were just mentioning that particular veteran just now, that it's not just those who died, but it's also those who suffered serious physical injury. We see the example there again. There are many, many of these people throughout our society who suffer significant life-changing injuries as a result of their service. And it's incumbent upon us to remember them not just on one day a year, but through all the days of the year, and to ensure that we, as a society, support them in their ongoing struggle with their disabilities.
And we cannot know the courage and effort that he may have had to put into getting himself ready to march past with his mates. And, you know, that's why this is a wonderful gathering for those who have served, and you and I have, to be back with the people who you don't need to talk about what you've been through, you just look at each other and you know.
Absolutely. And standing on the balcony and watching this march past in years gone by, it was always a great pleasure, not just to see the whole panoply of people, but to be able to pick out so many old friends amongst them.
There's always the burden of command and leadership from Whitehall during conflict. You've faced that, and the burden of responsibility of knowing about young lives brought to their end. How did you get to hear about casualties, and how did that affect you?
Well, I got to hear about them through the standard reporting system, which alerts people very quickly indeed. It's an unfortunate fact of conflict that people are going to die and people are going to be wounded. That's inherent in the very nature of war. The critical thing for anyone in a senior position is to reflect on whether or not this country is gaining sufficient strategic advantage for the price its people are paying in blood and suffering. That's a terrible calculus to have to make, but it's absolutely essential. We can't spend young lives to no avail. It has to be about something important for the country.
It's 12 o'clock. You're watching Sky News and the coverage of Remembrance Sunday here at the Cenotaph and the march past of veterans. I'm joined in the studio by Marshal of the Royal Air Force, the Lord Stirrup, who was Chief of the Defence Staff, and we're looking at the character and the enthusiasm of all these veterans. And it is, I think, for each of them, poignant and important to make the pilgrimage here to leave their wreaths.
It is, and also, of course, you and I both understand that people who've been involved in conflict and who've seen its challenges and sometimes its horrors find it enormously difficult to communicate that to people who've not been in the same situation. So being able to gather with old comrades, with fellow veterans, enables them to be able to talk about their experiences in a way that they can't more generally. And talking about them is extremely important, particularly in terms of mental health. I remember my own father, who was in the SS during the Second World War, was enormously proud of his association, but he would rarely, if ever, talk even to me about his experiences. But when he went to the reunions, my goodness, then the tongue was loosened.
Yes, well, I think that's one of the joys about this, is that for the rest of the day, once they have played their part and done their duty, that proud veteran there hugging close the wreath on behalf of his compatriots. He's not going to give that away to anybody until the time is right. But later, he will be with all his friends in the pubs and bars. And you know, you were talking about people who haven't served in the armed forces, but how important they are too, because they have traditionally, the British and wider Commonwealth communities have always been so supportive to servicemen and women and have understood that this is an important occasion, particularly those who lose limbs in battle and who need so much more help. And there being that fine veteran being supported by one of the pensioners himself, just showing how everyone comes together.
And of course, it's not just military veterans. As we saw in the gathering around the Cenotaph earlier, the civilian services were all represented, but it goes wider than that. In conflict, we have seen, of course, that it's civilian populations very often that suffer, and it's their endurance and their resilience and their resolve that is so important in making sure that, that we achieve the right outcome in any conflict.
The music, the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, played by the band of His Majesty's Royal Marines and the Royal Air Force bands. Some of the songs that we're hearing and remembering have words that certainly Lord Stirrup and I are not going to mention on air, but they were great songs to raise the morale of different generations. And we look at all those campaign medals so proudly worn on the left side. Many people wear campaign medals with that smart eyes left, campaign medals on the right-hand side. And of course, that is to represent members of their families who in previous generations have played their part. And it's a good tradition. It's good to see. Each of the organisations here come the regiments of the King's Royal Hussars with their special cherry trousers, colour that was taken from the livery of Queen Victoria's husband, who came from Saxe-Coburg, Gotha, and gave that colour to his own regiment, and there they are, wearing their cherry trousers.
One of the great skills military personnel have always possessed is writing irregular and unauthorised lyrics to existing songs.
I think you and I are going to have a bit of a sing-song later on when no one's listening and the microphones are turned off. I think one of the most moving moments I remember when I was learning to be a broadcaster was when I was with Tom Fleming, who taught me, and he watched as the blind came past, the blind from the Second World War, and he'd left it quiet for a moment, and then they gave their salute to the cenotaph, and he said very simply, they turn their heads in salute to a cenotaph they cannot see. Mm-hmm. And again, in just a few words, he encapsulated. Falklands veterans, I recognise that scarf. Each of those scarves were knitted by people in the Falklands and sent to all the veterans, which was marvellous. I mean, I've got mine. I'd wear it today, only it really is very warm to wear. But what an act of love by the people of the Falkland Islanders.
Marvellous. And of course, given the climate there, they would know all about the need for warm scarves.
So this parade marches past the cenotaph. They then turn right in Parliament Square and head down Birdcage Walk and into Horse Guards, where His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, on behalf of the King, is taking the final salute from each of these groups. The Army Air Corps represented there, who mostly flew helicopters in battle and supported the Army in its air operations. And so for the Prince of Wales, on behalf of the King and of the generation that took part in difficult operations like Afghanistan and Iraq, which of course you took part in yourself from a position of oversight.
Mm.
There are words coming to my mind, but anyway, wherever you are at home, have a giggle and honour these marvellous veterans. Undoubtedly, following the National Act of Remembrance, this march past by 10,000 veterans or supporters of what those veterans and servicemen and indeed civilian services have done to protect this nation is the highlight of this extraordinary day. And that fine in-pensioner with his Falkland Islands scarf round his neck marching past. And I've been joined for this very moving event by Marshal of the Royal Air Force, the Lord Stirrup. As we come to the conclusion of our live coverage, what thoughts do you have?
Well, it's been wonderful to see these 10,000 march past in what you have characterised as a national act of remembrance, but we should perhaps remember that this is just London and that there are similar acts of various scales going on up and down the country. So this truly is a national event, and it makes one proud to be part of a nation that considers the service of all these people to be so important that it remembers it annually on this day.
As the Marshal of the Royal Air Force says, you know, wherever you are, whatever village you're in, whatever nation in the Commonwealth you may be watching from, or whether you're on holiday in another part of the world, but just want to be a part of this moment of remembrance. We hope that in being with the King, the royal family, and political and Commonwealth representatives, you feel you have played your part in remembering the sacrifice, in bearing in mind those who carry the wounds, and in affirming the veterans and those who stand by to serve tomorrow on our behalf. From Whitehall, thank you very much indeed for being a part of this national act of remembrance.
Alistair, thank you to you as well for your commentary there alongside Lord Jock Stirrup. I've just got a few questions for you, Alistair, because you've been a part of this for some 30 years now, I believe, commentating on it. And I imagine it's never anything less than poignant, powerful, and as we're hearing that music now as well, rousing too.
Well, you're right. I have now been commentating for 30 years of this great event. And it is actually the first time I've commentated when I have not been serving myself. I've completed 45 and a half years of service in uniform, and I miss it all like mad. But in my last job as governor of Edinburgh Castle, I had the privilege of holding within the fortress the Scottish National Memorial, and in it are the books that hold the names of every Scot who has lost his or her life in battle. And while I was there, Corporal Gillen's name was added. She was killed by insurgents in Iraq, and we all remembered that for her service to the Scottish and North Irish Yeomanry. But I always remembered, and I always took my guests to see the names of the 4 soldiers I had trained with, not least my platoon sergeant, Sergeant Simeon, my orderly, Guardsman Jim Reynolds, and also Guardsman David Malcolmson and Guardsman Tambini. For me, they are always etched as these fine Gurkhas marching past hold their own names etched in their memories. But this cenotaph, whenever I pass it, is the place where, along with all of you, I can place the memories of all the thoughts I have in that empty tomb held aloft above the traffic of London at the heart of our great capital city. And I have always enjoyed the privilege of doing this, and I am but one of so many in this river of veterans.
It's good to remember and be reminded, Alistair, that you're not just an observer, you have been a participant. You are a Major General, and we caught the shot of you at the start there. And I have to be honest, I hadn't seen you with all those medals previously, which is a reminder that you have served and served for a long time. You mentioned your service in the Falklands War as well. So when you're pausing at 11 o'clock and falling silent, what goes through your mind?
Well, I think the 4 soldiers who I trained, and my very first day in the armed forces was when I turned up to Purbright to be trained, and the first person I met was Sergeant John Simeon, and I had been driven to my training by, this is going to be very embarrassing, I'm never going to live this down, by my nanny's son-in-law, who very sweetly drove me there. And while I was talking to the sergeant, he got my suitcases out of the car and asked where he should put them. And I asked the sergeant, he said, inside, turn left, second bed on the right. So off he went and did that. And he came out and said, is there anything else I can do? Now, he never did anything for me normally, but it did look to Sergeant Simeon as though I lived a life like this. And when my supportive driver drove away, Sergeant Simeon told me to go and get my suitcases. He pointed at a tree at the end of a field and said, go and run around that tree with your suitcases, shouting, I will not get my butler to carry my kit. So he was a huge influence on me, and to then be serving with him when he was shot, mortally wounded and killed in the Falklands War is a memory with humour and with respect that I always recall. He did, thank goodness, cut me down to size right at the beginning of my military service.
That's a fantastic story. I'm so sure stories like that are replicated by the thousand amongst the men and women marching today, and the many more watching on and remembering. But for now, thank you very much indeed. Well, a remembrance service has also been held today at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. Our correspondent Fraser Maud is there for us now. And Fraser, I imagine, well, just like we were seeing in London and in Cardiff and Edinburgh and other places around the UK, it was poignant, especially at 11 o'clock.
Absolutely. It's always moving and emotional coming here to the National Memorial Arboretum, whether there is a special event on or not. They have some 200 events throughout the year. Today, of course, is one of the main events in the calendar, Remembrance Sunday, and there were 6,000 people here to pay their respects in front of the Armed Forces Memorial here. This is a memorial that commemorates those who were lost, not just in battle, but through military service across the world since the end of the Second World War. There are thousands of names on there. I was talking to one veteran earlier who said he has got friends whose names are on there that he served with. It's a particularly emotional time for him, and he was here as part of the talent within the ranks programme that they operate here at the Memorial Arboretum in conjunction with the Royal British Legion, which helps people get over their traumas, helps them perform, writing poetry, which was performed today, songs which were performed today by veterans and by current serving personnel who are part of that programme. I can have a chat now with Mark Ellis from the National Memorial Arboretum. Again, another emotional day, but there is no better place to pay respects than here amongst so many monuments to remembrance.
Well, we like to think so, and people do come here in their hundreds of thousands all through the year. But today, to bring those people together for a communal act of remembrance with our Remembrance Day service is always a very, very special day for us.
I mentioned there the talent in the ranks scheme that you run with the Royal British Legion. That's been so helpful for the people who've taken part in it, hasn't it?
It really has, and they speak very powerfully about the impact it's had on them, how it's enabled them to express themselves, and has really benefited their mental health. And I think what it really adds to us, it's a partnership, it's a collaboration, it's that authenticity. It's our opportunity to tell authentic stories, more modern stories. Remembrance is relevant to everybody, and to make sure, alongside remembering this year we've talked about some of the 80th anniversaries from, D-Day, Monte Cassino, Kohima, but also be talking about Kosovo 25 years ago, the end of combat operations in Afghanistan 10 years ago, and to be working with people that have taken part in those campaigns. That's incredibly powerful and very, very moving for us all.
Which, of course, means that there are many younger veterans here who've also taken part in conflict, who've actually had to fight on the front lines because of those anniversaries you're saying about 25 years since Kosovo, 10 years since the end of hostilities, Afghanistan. We see those young people coming through, and younger still, don't we? The children's of those families and members of the public who've just come here today amongst those 6,000 to pay their respects.
Yeah, absolutely. There's descendants, there's family members, and of course, as you say, children, and children of currently serving member in the armed forces, the impact it has on their lives. It's really important that we do our bit to help pass on stories of remembrance to future generations. We teach, thousands of children in our classrooms here every year as well, so making sure those stories are passed on and remembrance remains relevant for people for years to come.
Thank you so much for talking to us, and thank you for allowing us here today. There will be another event here tomorrow, ticket only. The Duchess of Edinburgh will be here to pay her respects on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. But today, on Remembrance Sunday, certainly a day that will live long in the memories of many of those people who came here to pay their respects.
Fraser, thank you very much indeed. That's Fraser Maud at the National Memorial Arboretum. We'll move away from today's commemorations for a moment now, because the government is preparing for all scenarios. A cabinet minister told us today for what Donald Trump may decide to do when he becomes US president for a second time. The chief secretary to the Treasury was responding to warnings the new US administration may impose trade tariffs on friends and foes alike. Darren Jones, though, told Trevor Phillips earlier on that Donald Trump recognises the importance of the US's relationship with the UK.
The position of the government is that we support free trade and we support the trading relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom. It's a very strong, very fruitful relationship, both for us but also for the American economy. And of course, we want to protect that and strengthen it in the years ahead. And I think President-elect Trump has said that. I mean, he recognises the important relationship the US has with the UK, and that's the basis on which we will be cooperating.
Our political correspondent Rob Powell joins me now. Rob, look, there's a lot of discussion, of course, following the US election win for Donald Trump, but we're not really going to know for a couple of months yet as to what he will really do as he's president, because that's going to be when he's inaugurated.
Yeah, of course, quite a gap between the election and the inauguration, as usual for US presidential elections. I think the added sort of unpredictability or unknowability of all of this is that Donald Trump, by his very nature, is pretty unpredictable. So what everyone's trying to pick through is the messages that he put out on the campaign, specifically in this regard anyway, about tariffs and his threats to put up to 20% blanket tariffs on products coming into the US. And they're trying to work out whether that is just a threat or whether that is something that will actually happen in short order after he moves into the White House for a second time. I think there's a degree of hope that the special status, shall we say, of the UK in relation to the US, as well as the sort of political positives, as Donald Trump sees it, of Brexit, might mean that we get some kind of special treatment. But I don't think anyone expects this to be easy. How it was put to me by one person fairly close to this in government is that Donald Trump is a businessman at his core, and that he is not going to make it easy for the UK